Inside Holden's phone, tucked away in his Notes app, there was a folder named the Moon and Sixpence. Under Sixpence, he filed away the logistics of our shared life, the dry domestic dread, reminders to pay the electric bill, order gourmet gift baskets for his business partners, and schedule my parents' annual physicals. Under the Moon, however, was a meticulously curated index of Talia, his adoptive sister. Talia wants the new limited edition vinyl. Talia loves contestant number 15 on the survival show. Talia detests cedarwood perfume. Every time I confronted him about it, he would gently wipe my tears away and repeat the same hollow mantra. They were just siblings. There was nothing to worry about. The 19th time I questioned him, he didn't offer an excuse. Instead, he slid a diamond ring onto my finger. But yesterday at the bridal boutique on the Upper East Side, the heavy zipper of my lace gown snagged. No matter how delicately the stylist tugged, the metal refused to budge. Embarrassed, I turned my head toward the plush velvet sofa where Holden sat. Holden, can you come help me for a second? He began to push himself up, but before he could take a step, his phone chimed. It was the custom ringtone he had assigned exclusively to the Moon. His feet froze. He stared down at the screen, his gaze instantly locking. Mary, something urgent came up at the office, he said, not even looking up. They need me to make the final call. But the dress? Just pick whichever one you want. As long as you're wearing it, I'll love it. Without a single glance at my twisted posture or the half-zipped silk binding me tight, he turned on his heel and strode out of the boutique. I watched his car disappear around the corner of the avenue. Beside me, the young stylist was whispering apologies, her hands trembling. Looking at my reflection in the triple-pane mirror, framed in pristine, mocking white, I reached behind my back, gripped the stubborn metal slide, and yanked it with everything I had. The delicate French lace tore. Tiny freshwater pearls ripped from the fabric, scattering across the dark hardwood floor like spilled teeth, taking 5 years of my devotion with them. I stepped out of the ruined gown and forced a small, polite smile at the frozen stylist. Don't worry about the damage. Send the bill directly to the legal department at Douglas Group. The stylist's voice shook. Ms. Wood, this is a custom couture gown. Are you sure, Mr. Douglas? He'll pay. I cut her off quietly. It was surprising how easy it was to let go once the thread finally snapped. I changed back into my own white t-shirt and faded jeans, pushing open the heavy glass doors of the boutique. The oppressive midsummer heat of Manhattan hit me like a physical wall. My phone buzzed in my palm. It was a text from Holden. Mary, this issue at the office is really turning into a headache. Put whatever dress you want on my black card. I'll take you to that omakase place you love tonight. Be good. Wait for me. In his eyes, I was still the naive girl who could be pacified with a high-end dinner and a soft pat on the head. I didn't reply. Out of habit, my thumb drifted to Instagram, clicking on the little red notification dot. The very first post on my feed was from Talia, uploaded exactly 1 minute prior. The photo showed a man's hand carefully unboxing a rare, imported collectible figurine. On that wrist was the vintage Rolex I had spent 3 months tracking down for Holden's last birthday. So this was the urgent corporate crisis that required his personal executive sign-off. I stared at the image for a few silent seconds, then dialed his mother's number. Mary dear, have you finished the fitting? Hello, Mrs. Douglas. I'm calling to let you know that the wedding is off. You can cancel the venue. There was a sharp silence on the other end, followed by the clink of a porcelain teacup being set heavily onto its saucer. What kind of tantrum are you throwing now? Her voice cooled instantly. Holden runs an entire multinational conglomerate. It is completely normal for him to have last-minute emergencies. As his future wife, you need to learn some grace and support him, rather than tossing around threats of calling off the wedding every time you feel neglected. She paused, her tone dripping with quiet condescension. If you want to be the matriarch of the Douglas family, this childish behavior simply won't do. In the past, I would have swallowed the humiliation, offering a soft apology to keep the peace. But today, the armor of my patience was entirely gone. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Douglas. Which is why I am stepping down. I'll mail a full inventory of the engagement gifts back to your estate by tomorrow morning. Before she could utter another word, I ended the call. Then I dialed my dad. Mary? Sweetheart, are you exhausted from the fitting? Your mom is in the kitchen making your favorite pot roast right now. We're waiting for you to come home. Hearing his gravelly, warm voice, the tightness in my chest finally fractured. A thick, hot wave of emotion rushed up my throat. Dad, I whispered. I'm not getting married. There was a sharp clatter on the other end. The sound of a metal spatula hitting the kitchen tile. My dad was silent for 2 long seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, wrapping around me like a shield. Okay, if you don't want to do it, we won't do it. Your happiness is the only thing that matters to us, Mary. If he made you feel small, you come right back home. I'll meet you at the train station. My eyes stung. I blinked back the tears, tilting my head up toward the blinding afternoon sun. Okay, I'm coming home. I walked toward the subway station. On the brick wall beside the entrance, a flyer was taped, a recruitment poster for the foreign exchange program at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. 5 years ago, when Holden suffered a severe stomach hemorrhage from corporate drinking, I had torn up my acceptance letter to that very school, choosing instead to stay by his bedside and learn how to cook bland, low-sodium meals. Back then, pale and trembling in his hospital bed, he had gripped my hand and told me he was the luckiest man alive to have found me. But I didn't want to be his lucky charm anymore. It was time to find my own moon. I pulled out my phone, opened the academy's portal, and submitted my application. I spent the night at my parents' house, laying out the truth of the broken engagement and my plans for Paris. My mother held me tightly, her tears dampening my hair, whispering that they would back me no matter where I went. The next morning, as I took the trash down to the curb, Holden's sleek black sedan pulled up to the driveway. The door swung open, and he stepped out, his brow furrowed in frustration. Behind him, Talia slipped out of the passenger side. He reached out, trying to grab my wrist. "Mary, why didn't you come home last night? Your phone was off all night. Do you have any idea how worried I was?" His voice carried the familiar, exasperated tone of a parent dealing with a petulant child. I stepped back, letting his hand fall through empty air. My gaze was entirely flat. "Didn't your mother tell you?" "I've already." Before I could finish, Talia peeked out from behind his shoulder, her doll-like eyes rimmed with red. "Mary, please don't be angry with Holden." She sniffled, her voice small and trembling. "Yesterday was entirely my fault. He was just helping me pick up a package. I even skipped my dance company's dress rehearsal today, just so I could come here and apologize to you face to face." "There's no need," I said, my voice deadpan. "The two of you share a beautiful bond. You don't owe an outsider like me any explanations." Holden's face darkened, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Talia skipped a crucial rehearsal just to make things right with you, Mary. Why do you have to be so bitter?" he snapped. "Our wedding is weeks away, and you're running off to your parents' place over a misunderstanding. Think about how they'll worry. Get in the car. We'll talk about this at home." I had no energy to argue with him on a gravel driveway. But my passport and visa documents were still in the safe at our shared apartment. Without them, I couldn't even secure my travel boarding pass. I walked toward the sedan and reached for the front passenger door. Talia suddenly chimed in. "Oh, Mary, do you mind if I sit in the front? I didn't eat breakfast and my motion sickness is really acting up." Without a word, I let go of the handle and climbed into the back seat. The ride was a suffocating exercise in silence. In the front, Talia chattered endlessly about her dance routines and her favorite choreographers, and Holden replied to every single prompt with effortless warmth. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, exhausted monosyllables he usually offered during our dinners. They weren't even blood-related. I should have opened my eyes years ago. Talia popped open the glove compartment to look for a mint. Oh, from the very back of the compartment, she pulled out a delicate, vintage pearl hair clip. She turned around, her face lit up with delight. "I thought I lost this weeks ago. I can't believe it was in your car the whole time, Holden." Holden glanced at it, a fond smile touching his lips. "You'd lose your head if it weren't attached to your neck." My gaze drifted to the pearl clip. The air conditioning in the car suddenly felt sub-zero, sending a physical shiver straight to my chest. 5 years ago, on the night I finally gathered the courage to tell Holden I loved him, I had been wearing that exact same pearl clip. He had stared at my hair, his eyes melting with a warmth I thought was meant for me, before whispering yes. I had spent half a decade believing we were a match made in heaven. Now the puzzle pieces fell into place with a sickening click. I had been nothing but a cheap placeholder. The only reason I had ever stood a chance at being next to him was because I wore a hair clip that belonged to Talia. I had lived in a stolen dream for 5 years. Holden didn't deny her words. He kept his eyes on the road, navigating the morning traffic, entirely oblivious to the absolute emotional carnage occurring in his backseat. When we finally arrived at our apartment, the front door was wide open. The loud, violent thud of sledgehammers echoed from within. The living room was a war zone of drywall dust and plastic tarps. 3 construction workers were systematically tearing down the plaster walls of my painting studio. A massive hole had already been punctured through the wood paneling, filling the air with white powder. I froze, my mind struggling to process the scene. "Oh right, I forgot to mention," Holden said casually, stepping over a pile of debris. "The floors in Talia's personal dance studio warped, so I decided to convert your art room into a rehearsal space for her. You rarely use it anyway, so I figured you wouldn't mind." Talia bypassed me like a joyous child, stepping into the ruined space to point and gesture her layout ideas to the contractor. Holden watched her, his face soft and deeply proud. A wave of profound, physical nausea hit me. "Holden," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My parents put up half the down payment for this apartment, so I wouldn't feel like a beggar in your house. Don't you think you should have asked me before destroying my space?" Holden's expression turned instantly to irritation. "Mary, Do you really have to bring up money right now? I can wire your parents double their investment this afternoon. We're going to be family. Why are you keeping score? I clenched my fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. I walked past him, stepping through the plaster dust into our bedroom, and gathered my passport, birth certificate, and legal documents into my bag. Then please have your accountant wire that money to my father's account immediately. Once the funds clear, you can turn this entire building into her playground for all I care. I grabbed my bag, slammed the door, and left the noise of the hammers behind me. When I reached my parents' house, intending to tell them I had retrieved my documents, I found the house completely empty. Then my phone started vibrating violently. It was the family group chat. My aunt had forwarded a trending local news video, tagging me repeatedly. My chest tightened. With trembling fingers, I tapped the play button. The video was taken from a distance, shaky and silent. In the frame, my aging parents were kneeling on the wet gravel driveway outside the Douglas family's massive estate in Greenwich. Scattered around them on the ground were the silk-wrapped engagement boxes we had tried to return. Mrs. Douglas stood on the grand stone portico above them, flanked by 2 burly security guards. Her face twisted in sneering disgust as she pointed her finger at them. Tears instantly spilled over my eyelashes, burning my cheeks. I sprinted out of the house, waving down a passing yellow cab. Greenwich. The Douglas estate on Ridge Road. Please step on it. By the time the taxi neared the estate gates, a cold drizzle had begun to fall. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw my parents sitting on a low concrete retaining wall by the roadside. My dad's trousers were caked with mud at the knees, his head buried in his hands. Dad. Mom. I screamed, throwing myself out of the cab and running toward them. Mary? What are you doing here? My mom frantically wiped her eyes, trying to hide the swelling of her eyelids. Why did they make you kneel? I sobbed, kneeling down to brush the gravel and dirt from my dad's knees. My dad took my hands in his fingers cold and trembling. We went to return the heirloom jewelry and the dowry check, Mary. The guards wouldn't let us in. Then Mrs. Douglas came out. She said if we wanted to call off the wedding and keep our dignity, we had to show proper respect for insulting their name. She threw the boxes into the mud and told us that small-town nobodies don't get to reject the Douglas without paying a price. He managed a weak, heartbreaking smile. It's just a knee on the ground, sweetheart. If it means you get to walk away clean from that family, your old man would kneel 1,000 times. My heart felt as though it were being slowly ground into dust. The air in my lungs tasted like copper. I took my parents home, cleaned them up, and made sure they were safe. That evening, I received my official acceptance letter from the Beaux-Arts de Paris. I immediately began preparing for my departure. I had already wasted 5 years of my youth on a terrible mistake. I wasn't going to let them steal another second of my future. I ignored every single call and text from Holden. He sent a flurry of messages claiming he was coming to find me, but a sudden executive trip to London kept him out of the country. A week later, my phone rang from an unknown corporate number. Is this Mary Wood? This is the legal department at Douglas Group. Speaking. We are calling to inform you that Ms. Talia Douglas has granted exclusive commercial licensing rights for her painting, Summer Night, to Douglas Group. We have flagged your pending portfolio submission for the European art circuit, and noted that your piece is a direct plagiarism of her work. If you proceed with your submission, Douglas Group will file an immediate injunction, block your international travel visas, and sue you for $30 million in damages. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. That is impossible. I painted Summer Night over 3 months. I have every single preliminary sketch and canvas draft in my possession. Ms. Wood, Ms. Douglas posted the completed piece on her verified social media accounts last week. In terms of public copyright timeline, we hold absolute precedence. I hung up and opened Instagram. Talia had spent the last year building an online persona as an effortless, artistic heiress. Her account was verified, boasting hundreds of thousands of followers. And there it was. A post from 6 days ago showing her completed canvas. Within hours, the hashtag #MaryWoodPlagiarist began trending locally. Someone had even leaked the video of my parents kneeling outside the Douglas estate, but the narrative had been viciously warped. Plagiarists' parents beg on their knees after failed attempt to blackmail billionaire family into marriage. The comment sections were a toxic wasteland of threats and insults. Someone had already leaked my parents' home address. Before I could even process the horror, heavy, violent boots began pounding against our front door. Get out of there, you frauds! Thieving family. Kneeling like dogs to get a payout. Disgusting. My parents, unaware of the online storm, had been preparing to go grocery shopping. They were forced back inside by a small, hostile crowd gathering on our lawn. My dad sat on the sofa, his hands covering his face, while my mother wept silently in the corner. I drew in a long, shaky breath and dialed Holden's personal line. He picked up on the second ring. Holden, I painted that piece in my own studio. Why are you letting Talia do this to me? I demanded, fighting to keep my voice from cracking. There was a long pause on the line, followed by a heavy sigh. Mary, Talia just really liked your painting. She posted it on a whim. She didn't know you were using it for your portfolio. So she gets to steal it? You have to understand her position, Holden said, his tone entirely defensive. She has 500,000 followers. Next week, she's auditioning for the Paris Opera Ballet. If the public finds out she took someone else's work, her entire career is over before it starts. But you, he continued softly, you're just an independent artist. You don't have a public profile. This won't actually affect your life. The words caught in my throat like rusted nails. Every syllable he uttered felt like a physical blow. Outside, a heavy rock shattered the glass of our front porch window. The dry rose petals in the entryway vase vibrated from the impact, scattering silently onto the dusty table. 5 years of devotion, entirely hollowed out. So I'm supposed to take the fall for her? I asked, my voice completely flat. He let out a soft, relieved chuckle. It's not that dramatic, Mary. Just issue a brief public statement saying you used her work as inspiration. Once you do that, I'll personally have the legal team drop the lawsuit. I looked at my mother's silver hair, then at the shattered glass on the floor. Fine, y whispered. I'll post it. I'll upload the statement tonight at 8 o'clock. You can check it yourself, Holden. I knew you'd understand, sweetheart. You've always been the sensible one. I'll bring you those roasted chestnuts you like from the city when I get back tomorrow. I hung up. I immediately called a local real estate agent and listed my parents' house for a quick cash sale. Within 3 hours, we had packed our entire lives into 6 suitcases. At 7 o'clock, I walked my parents onto a southbound train to stay with my aunt in North Carolina, far away from the madness. By 8 o'clock, I was sitting alone in the terminal at JFK Airport. I opened my laptop, logged into my cloud storage, and retrieved the raw time-lapse videos of my painting process. I had always kept a digital archive of my work from start to finish. If Holden had ever cared enough to look at my art, he would have known that. I packaged the video files alongside the recorded audio of my phone call with Holden, and emailed them directly to every major arts publication, national news outlet, and the admissions board at the École des Beaux-Arts. Then, I posted the entire archive to my social media accounts. My caption was simple. I won't be paying $30 million, but I will see you in court. I shut down my laptop, picked up my carry-on, and boarded the flight to Paris. Meanwhile, Holden's private jet had just touched down in New York. He instructed his assistant to go uptown and buy a box of the gourmet chestnuts Mary loved, before personally stopping at a bakery to pick up a box of French macarons for Talia. As he signed the receipt at the bakery counter, his phone buzzed with an alert from Instagram. Finally came to her senses, he murmured with a faint smile, opening the notification. But the screen did not display an apology. As the time-lapse video of Mary painting and the clear, damning audio of his own voice filled the high-end bakery, the smile died on Holden's face. He frantically dialed Mary's number. A cold, mechanical voice answered. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. The high-end bakery on Madison Avenue smelled of caramel, burnt butter, and vanilla bean. Holden Douglas stood motionless by the marble counter, a box of pastel-colored macarons resting in his left hand, his right hand frozen over his phone screen. The audio from the viral video echoed through the quiet shop, crisp and unforgiving. This won't actually affect your life. Just issue a brief public statement saying you used her work as inspiration. The pastry chef behind the counter paused, looking up from his piping bag. 2 women waiting near the window turned their heads, their eyes flicking from their phone screens to Holden's face, recognition dawning like a sharp blade. Isn't that Mr. Douglas? One whispered, her voice carrying across the polished tile floor. The one from the recording? Holden didn't hear them. His thumb swiped frantically, refreshing the page, praying it was a glitch, an AI forgery, a nightmare he could wake up from. It wasn't. The time-lapse video posted by @Marywood_art was brutal in its clarity. It showed 48 days of continuous labor crammed into 3 brilliant minutes. Mary sitting in her dust-covered painting studio, her hair clipped back. With an old plastic clamp, canvas after canvas being prepped, layers of oil built up with surgical precision. The timestamp on the raw camera metadata in the description read 4 months prior, long before Talia had ever picked up a brush. Beneath it, the audio recording of their phone call had already amassed 3 million plays in less than 20 minutes. The comment section was a roaring avalanche. He literally forced his fiancée to take the fall for his spoiled sister's theft. Listen to his tone. You've always been the sensible one. Translation: I expect you to sacrifice your life for my golden child. Who is this Talia Douglas? She stole a painting, posted it as her own, and had Douglas Group sue the actual artist for $30 million? Is this billionaire corruption or mental illness? Holden's phone vibrated violently, the haptic engine buzzing against his palm, like a trapped hornet. It was his chief of PR, Julian Vance. Holden clicked answer, his voice hoarse. Julian. Where the hell are you, Holden? Julian screamed over the line background. Noise blaring with ringing phones and shouting staff. The board is holding an emergency conference call in 10 minutes. Douglas Group stock is already down 4% in after-hours trading. The Paris Opera Ballet just released an official statement canceling Talia's audition and banning her from the premises. Holden felt the air leave his lungs. Cancel? Did you give that interview audio to her, Holden? Did you actually tell your fiancé to confess to plagiarism on camera? Julian's voice cracked with disbelief. Every major arts publication in Europe has picked up the story. The admissions office at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris just issued a public press release confirming Mary Wood's full acceptance into their master's program and declaring Douglas Group's legal threats an egregious abuse of corporate power. Holden's fingers went cold. The box of macarons slipped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a soft thud, the delicate pink and blue shells shattering inside the cardboard. Holden, are you listening to me? Julian barked. Where is Mary? You need to get her on live camera right now. Have her say it was a private misunderstanding, a joke, anything. Her phone is disconnected, Holden stammered, stepping backward toward the bakery door. I'm going to her house. He didn't wait for his driver. He snatched the keys to his sedan, threw himself into the driver's seat, and slammed his foot on the accelerator, tearing down the avenue toward the Wood family residence in the outer borough. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing downpour by the time he reached the neighborhood. Holden slammed the brakes outside the modest 2-story brick home. He threw open the door, ignoring the rain soaking through his tailored wool coat, and ran up the gravel driveway. Mary, he shouted, pounding his fist against the wooden front door. Mary, open the door. It's me. Let's talk about this. The house was pitch black. Holden reached out to press the doorbell, but his hand froze. In the dim glow of the street lamp he saw it, a heavy yellow for sale cash only sign planted in the muddy lawn. Beside the porch steps, the small circular window of the entryway was shattered, sharp shards of glass glinting in the dark. Scattered across the wet gravel were crushed dry rose petals, and the muddy tread marks of heavy boots. The house was empty. Holden stepped onto the porch, his knees shaking. He pressed his face against the side window, peering into the living room. The furniture was gone. The framed family photos Mary had cherished were gone. The small wooden easel her father had built for her 25th birthday was gone. There was nothing left except a pile of drywall dust near the door and a single, crumpled piece of paper lying on the porch mat. Holden dropped to his knees, his trousers soaking up the muddy rainwater, and picked up the paper. It was the receipt from the local junk removal company Mary had hired 3 hours ago. At the bottom, written in her neat, precise handwriting, was a note. Left for the mail carrier. All future mail for the Wood family should be returned to sender. No forward address available. Holden clutched the paper to his chest, the freezing rain drenching his hair, running down his neck, cold as ice. She hadn't just left him. She had erased her family, her home, her roots, and her past, leaving him standing in the mud outside an empty shell. At 2 a.m., the Douglas estate in Greenwich was ablaze with light. Holden pushed open the heavy oak double doors, his clothes still damp, smelling faintly of rain and gasoline. The grand foyer, usually quiet and pristine, was in absolute turmoil. His mother, Mrs. Eleanor Douglas, was pacing the marble floor in a velvet dressing gown, a cold compress held to her forehead. On the velvet sofa sat Talia, her eyes red, her hair disheveled, clutching an iPad showing her social media feed. Holden, Mrs. Douglas turned, her voice sharp with aristocratic fury. Where have you been? Do you know what that thieving, ungrateful girl has done to our family name? The press is parked outside our security gates. Talia looked up, her voice breaking into a hysterical sob as she threw herself into Holden's arms. Holden, they canceled my audition. The Paris Opera Ballet sent a letter to my agent saying I'm blacklisted from European venues. It's all Mary's fault. She ruined my life. Holden stood rigid. For 5 years, every time Talia cried, his body responded automatically, a surge of protective instinct, a desperate need to fix her world, to shield her from the slightest discomfort. Tonight, as her wet tears soaked into his damp suit jacket, he felt nothing, only a hollow, suffocating numbness. He gently, firmly, pushed her hands off his shoulders. Talia blinked, startled by his coldness. Holden. Holden didn't look at her. He turned to his mother. Why were Mary's parents kneeling on our driveway yesterday, Mom? Mrs. Douglas's face stiffened. She adjusted her dressing gown, her expression turning dismissive. They were being dramatic, as small-town people always are. They came here throwing those engagement boxes into our foyer, demanding to cancel the wedding. I simply told them that commoners don't get to disrespect the Douglas family without showing proper deference. Propeda Faransa. Holden's voice dropped flat and dangerous. You made an old man with arthritis kneel in the gravel while it was raining. They insulted us. Mrs. Douglas snapped. Mary abandoned you. She ran off. I was protecting our dignity. Our dignity? Holden let out a low, bitter laugh that sounded almost insane. Mom, do you know what the internet is calling us right now? They're calling us wealthy abusers. They're calling Talia a talentless thief and me an executive enabler. Holden, Talia gasped, her lips trembling. How can you say that? I didn't steal her painting. I shared it because I liked it. You said it was fine. I said it was fine, Holden repeated, turning his gaze onto Talia. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and opened the Notes app. He scrolled down to the folder titled The Moon and Sixpence. For 5 years, this folder had been his pride. Under Sixpence, he had filed Mary. The mundane logistics of maintaining a domestic partner, the dry bills, the gift baskets for his business partners, the reminders to check her parents' medical records. Under the Moon, he had filed Talia. Her poetry, her ballet, shoes, her favorite teas, her delicate moods. He had believed he was an artist of human relationships, a man balancing the practical obligations of earth with the poetic beauty of the sky. Holden tapped on the Moon. Talia wants the new limited edition vinyl. Talia loves contestant number 15. Talia detests cedarwood perfume. Talia needs $40,000 for her dance studio flooring. Talia wants Mary's painting for her social media header. He stared at the screen. The text, once so poetic in his mind, suddenly looked hideous. It wasn't a list of a sister's delicate desires. It was a ledger of parasitic demands. And under Sixpence? Mary, remind her to take her iron supplements. Mary, father's knee surgery schedule. Mary, likes roasted chestnuts from Madison Avenue. Mary, painting studio rent due on the 15th. Every entry under Sixpence had been Mary taking care of him, or Mary asking for the bare minimum to survive beside him. And he had treated those items like chores, burdens, domestic dread. Holden looked up at Talia. You didn't just share her painting, Talia, Holden said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You gave it to my legal team to copyright under your name. You watched them threaten her with a $30 million lawsuit. You watched her parents kneel outside our gate. And you sat in my car this morning, wearing her pearl hair clip, complaining about motion sickness. Talia shrank back, her fake innocence evaporating, replaced by a spike of ugly anger. So what? She's just a nobody from upstate. You're my brother. You're supposed to take my side. I am not your brother, Holden said softly. You were adopted when I was 12. We don't share blood. And starting tonight, we don't share a name. Mrs. Douglas gasped. Holden, have you lost your mind? The PR team is issuing a statement at 6 a.m. tomorrow, Holden said, ignoring his mother completely. Douglas Group is officially severing all commercial affiliations with Talia Douglas. We are withdrawing our legal representation, settling Marywood's copyright infringement claim out of court, and issuing a full public apology. If you do that, my career is over. Talia screamed, lunging forward, trying to grab his arm. Holden, you can't do this to me. Holden stepped back, dodging her touch as if she were covered in poison. Your career was built on her canvas, Talia, Holden said, looking at her with absolute disgust. Now you can try painting your own. He turned on his heel and walked out of the estate, leaving the two women screaming into the empty grandeur of the marble hall. 6,000 miles away, the morning sun over Paris was veiled in a soft, phosphorescent fog. Marywood sat on a green wooden bench in the Jardin du Luxembourg, a hot paper cup of black coffee resting beside her, a sketchbook balanced on her knees. The air smelled of damp earth, roasted chestnuts, and linseed oil. She wore a simple charcoal coat, a soft dark scarf wrapped around her neck, and flat leather boots. Her hair, no longer clipped with plastic clamps, fell over her shoulders in loose, dark waves. Her phone lay on the bench beside her. It was a new French SIM card, completely disconnected from her old life. An hour ago, she had checked her bank account. The cashier's check from the sale of her parents' home had cleared, along with an unexpected wire transfer of $200,000 from Douglas Group's corporate legal fund, labeled Unconditional Settlement and Retraction of Slander Claims. She hadn't spent a single second celebrating. She had simply transferred $40,000 to her aunt's account in North Carolina to secure a quiet, sunlit townhouse for her parents, and put the rest into a long-term art supply fund. Mademoiselle Wood? A tall, elderly man with a silver mustache and a tweed coat stopped in front of her bench. It was Professor Jean-Luc Laurent, the head of the Fine Arts department at the École des Beaux-Arts. Mary stood up, bowing her head politely. Bonjour, professeur. Professor Laurent smiled, gesturing toward her sketchbook. Still working before class begins. Just catching the morning light, sir, Mary replied in fluid, quiet French. Laurent looked at her, his sharp blue eyes warm with respect. I reviewed the raw digital archives your legal representative sent over last week, Mary. The time-lapse of summer night. It was magnificent. The brushwork in the second layer. The way you broke the blue glaze with cadmium orange. It shows a soul that understands how to survive fire. Mary offered a small, quiet smile. Thank you, Professor. Forget the circus in New York, Laurent said gently, tapping his cane against the gravel path. Here, you are not anyone's victim, and you are not anyone's muse. You are an artist. Today, we begin stretching your giant canvases in Studio 4. I'm ready, sir. They walked together across the gravel paths toward the grand stone facade of the Academy. For 5 years, Mary had believed that art was a luxury she had to beg Holden to allow her to keep, a small studio room borrowed in his apartment, a corner of his life she had to apologize for occupying. Now, as she stepped into Studio 4, a massive room with 30-foot ceilings, flooded with north-facing light, smelling of turpentine and raw duck canvas, she realized the truth. Her art had never been a beggar in his house. His house had simply been too small to hold it. Back in Manhattan, time did not heal Holden Douglas. It decomposed him. 3 months had passed since the viral video. The immediate PR crisis had been contained by Douglas Group throwing Talia under the bus, but the internal damage to Holden's life was absolute. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk on the 45th floor of the Douglas Tower. He looked gaunt. His expensive tailored suits hung loosely on his frame, his jawline covered in rough stubble, dark purple shadows permanently carved beneath his eyes. His stomach ulcer, neglected for years, had ruptured 2 weeks prior, landing him in the ICU for 4 days. During those 4 days, no one came to make him low-sodium chicken broth. No one sat beside his bed, holding his hand, whispering that he was the luckiest man alive. His mother had visited once to complain about her lowered monthly dividend allowance. Talia had called 3 times from her new apartment in Brooklyn, weeping about her rent and demanding he unfreeze her trust fund. Holden had hung up on both of them. His new executive assistant, a sharp, efficient woman named Sarah, walked into the office carrying a stack of leather folders. Mr. Douglas, the quarterly domestic reports are ready for your signature, Sarah said, her tone cold and professional. Holden didn't look up from his laptop. Did you order the gift baskets for the board members' anniversaries? I did, Sarah replied. However, the vendor you usually use raised their prices by 15%, and 2 of the board members' wives called to complain that the wine selection was incorrect. Holden rubbed his throbbing temples. Mary used to handle those. Miss Wood was not an employee of this firm, sir, Sarah reminded him flatly. And I am an executive assistant, not a personal concierge. Holden swallowed the bitter taste in his mouth. What about my parents' medical checkups at New York Presbyterian? The hospital called yesterday, Sarah said. The appointments were canceled because your mother refused to fill out the preliminary intake forms herself. She said Miss Wood always did it for her. Holden closed his eyes. Sixpence. The domestic dread he had looked down upon. The electric bills, the gift baskets, the medical schedules, the low-sodium meals, the quiet presence that kept his entire corporate and personal world running smoothly, had not been dry boring logistics. It had been the invisible foundation of his life. Mary hadn't been his sixpence, while Talia was his moon. Mary had been the entire earth beneath his feet, allowing him to stare at a fake moon without falling into the abyss. And he had thrown the earth away for a painted rock. Holden pulled out his personal phone. He opened the Notes app. He selected the folder The Moon and Sixpence. He hit Select All and clicked Delete. Then he opened his browser and typed a single query into the search bar. Gallery exhibitions. École de Beaux-Arts Paris fall schedule. Spring turned to autumn in Paris. The Salon d'Automne at the Grand Palais was one of the most prestigious art exhibitions in Europe. Hundreds of critics, international collectors, gallery directors, and journalists moved beneath the soaring glass and iron dome, sipping champagne under the warm gallery spotlights. Near the center of the main hall, a massive crowd had gathered around a single, 8-foot-tall canvas. The painting was titled, The Unzipping of White Lace. It was a masterpiece of raw, physical realism. The canvas depicted the back view of a woman standing in front of a triple-pane mirror. She was wearing an exquisite, snow-white couture gown, but the zipper along her spine was violently torn open, raw threads and shattered freshwater, pearls falling like rain toward a dark hardwood floor. In her hand, she didn't hold a bouquet or a ring. She held a heavy palette knife coated in vibrant, brilliant cadmium orange and deep cobalt blue, slicing clean through the white lace. The metaphor was so terrifyingly clear, so wildly liberated, that art critics stood before it in hushed awe. It's extraordinary, a critic from Le Figaro murmured to his colleague. The white dress represents the choking expectations of traditional sacrifice, but the tear isn't a tragedy. It's an exit. Who is the artist? Mary Wood. She's Professor Lawrence's protégé. They say every gallery in London and Paris is bidding for her entire retrospective. Standing near the back of the crowd, dressed in a wrinkled charcoal suit, stood Holden Douglas. He had been in Paris for 3 days. He had slept a total of 4 hours. He looked like a ghost haunting a palace. He stared at the painting. Every inch of the canvas screamed her pain, her release, and her ultimate rebirth. He saw the pearls, the very pearls he had watched scatter across the boutique floor on Madison Avenue while he turned his back to answer Talia's call. He saw the torn lace he had dismissed as a simple fitting annoyance. He saw himself, not as a prince, not as a savior, but as the dull, heavy lock that she had torn through to reach the sky. It's a powerful piece, isn't it? A quiet, melodic voice sounded from behind him. Holden's heart slammed against his ribs. He turned slowly, his hands shaking, his breath catching in his throat. Mary stood 3 feet away. She wore an elegant midnight blue velvet suit, her hair styled in an effortless French twist, a single gold band on her index finger. She held a glass of sparkling water, her dark eyes clear, calm, and shining like stars. She looked at him. There was no rage in her face, no shock, no bitter resentment. She looked at him the exact same way she looked at the marble statues lining the gallery hall, as an object of historic interest that held zero relevance to her present. Mary. Holden choked out, his voice cracking, stepping forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. Mary. I found you. Mary didn't step back. She didn't need to. Her stillness was a wall more impenetrable than iron. Mr. Douglas, she said softly, her French-accented English smooth as silk. I see you made it to Paris. Holden's eyes flooded with tears. Hearing her call him Mr. Douglas felt like a cold blade sliding into his chest. Mary, please don't call me that, he wept, dropping all his executive composure, ignoring the curious glances from the gallery patrons around them. I was wrong. I was blind. I destroyed Talia's trust fund. I cut my mother off. I deleted the notes app, Mary. I deleted everything. He reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a small, velvet jewelry box. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside lay a custom-designed diamond ring. Not the one he had given Talia, but a brand new, flawless 5-carat emerald-cut diamond, set in pure platinum. I bought back the apartment on Madison Avenue, Holden sobbed, his knees shaking so badly, he almost fell to the floor. I rebuilt your studio. I bought the entire building so no one can ever touch your space again. Mary, please, come home. I'll give you Douglas Group. I'll give you my life. Just let me be your sixpence again. Mary looked at the sparkling diamond in the box. Then she looked up at his desperate, broken face. Holden, she said, her voice gentle, carrying the quiet weight of absolute truth. Do you remember the night you proposed to me 5 years ago? Holden nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. Yes, you were wearing that vintage pearl clip. I was wearing that pearl clip, Mary interrupted softly, because I found it in the glove compartment of your car an hour before dinner. I thought you had bought it for me. Holden froze. It took me 5 years to realize, Mary continued, taking a slow sip of her water, that I spent half a decade wearing someone else's forgotten trash, thinking it was a crown. She set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray. You don't want me back, Holden, she said, looking straight into his hollow eyes. You just missed the luxury of being loved by someone who gave you everything for nothing. Mary, no. I love you. I swear to God I love you. He begged, reaching out, his fingers brushing the hem of her velvet sleeve. Mary gently, deliberately, stepped out of his reach. The auction for the unzipping of white lace begins in 10 minutes, she said, offering him a small, polite, devastatingly beautiful smile. If you want the painting, you're welcome to bid. But as for the artist, she turned her back on him, stepping into the warm light of the exhibition hall, toward Professor Laurent, and a group of international patrons waiting to toast her success. She's no longer for sale. Holden stood alone beneath the soaring glass dome of the Grand Palais, holding an open velvet box, surrounded by champagne, art, and brilliant light, a man holding a handful of cold diamonds in a world that had moved entirely beyond him.